On the biggest night of our lives, as $1 million prize hung in the balance, my father confessed the horrifying truth. The money wasn't to save my little sister, but to pay for her funeral. And that's when I knew I had to expose his lie, even if it meant tearing our family apart on live television. The heat from the studio lights felt like a physical weight on my shoulders. 1,000 fake-tanned, cheering faces blurred into a single roaring beast in the darkness beyond the stage. Beside me, my family was a bundle of raw nerves and cheap polyester. My sister, Sarah, was twisting the hem of her team jersey, number 11. My younger brother, Mike, number 13, was practically vibrating with excitement, his eyes wide as he soaked in the circus. And then there was Dad, number 10, the captain, his face a mask of grim determination. I was Steve, number 12, the anchor, the one who was supposed to hold us all together. We were on the final round of Family Fortunes Live, a primetime game show where families competed in ridiculous physical and mental challenges for a life-changing sum of money, $1 million. Enough to solve every problem we'd ever had, and a few we didn't even know about yet. Dad had been the one to push for it. He'd filled out the applications in secret, drilled us with trivia for weeks, and coached us through the obstacle course in the backyard until our muscles screamed. "This is it," he'd said, his voice tight with a desperation I didn't fully understand. "This is for our future. For everything." The host, a man with teeth so white they looked like a threat, bounced on the balls of his feet. "All right, Miller family. You are just one challenge away from $1 million. The crowd erupted. Mike pumped his fist in the air. Sarah managed a weak, watery smile. I just looked at Dad. He hadn't smiled once all night. He just stared at the final obstacle, a monstrous climbing wall covered in trivia questions, as if he were staring down an old enemy. The challenge was simple, but brutal. I, as the designated anchor, had to answer questions correctly to reveal handholds for my family to climb the wall. If I got one wrong, a 10-second penalty. If they fell, we lost precious time. We had 2 minutes to get all 3 of them to the top. My heart was a jackhammer against my ribs. All our hopes, all of Dad's obsessive training, came down to this. The buzzer blared, and we were off. "Steve!" "In what year was the Declaration of Independence signed?" Chip, the host, yelled. 1776, I shouted back. A green light flashed, and a handhold lit up. "Go, Dad, go!" I screamed. He scrambled up the wall with an agility that defied his 50 years. He was a man possessed. "Sarah!" "Who wrote To Kill a Mockingbird?" "Harper Lee!" Another handhold appeared. Sarah followed, more cautious but steady. Mike was last, his lanky teenage frame struggling to keep up. The questions came fast and furious. World capitals, periodic elements, Shakespearean quotes. The stuff Dad had drilled into me relentlessly. My mind was a machine, spitting out answers as my family clawed their way higher. The clock was a monster, devouring seconds. 30 seconds left. Dad was at the top, reaching down for Sarah. 20 seconds. Sarah was up, and they were both hauling a terrified Mike over the edge. 10 seconds. 9. 8. I was screaming myself hoarse. Mike's hand slapped the final buzzer at the top just as the clock hit 3 seconds. The studio exploded. Cannons shot confetti into the air. The theme music swelled, and the crowd was on its feet, a tidal wave of sound. We'd done it. We had actually done it. Mike was sobbing with joy. Sarah was hugging Dad so hard I thought she might break his ribs. I felt a dizzying rush of relief, so potent it almost buckled my knees. I looked at Dad, expecting to finally see him break, to see the joy and the relief on his face. But he just stood there, catching his breath, the confetti sticking to his sweaty forehead. He looked empty, vindicated, but not happy. Chip Smiley slung his arms around Dad and me. "America, you have just witnessed a miracle. The Miller family has conquered the gauntlet. $1 million. He shoved a microphone in Dad's face. "John, I have to ask. We've all seen the fire in your eyes tonight. This clearly means more to you than just the money. Tell us, what are you going to do with your winnings?" The crowd quieted, leaning in for the heartwarming, pre-packaged story. This was the part of the show where families talked about paying off mortgages, starting college funds, or taking a dream vacation to Disney World. Dad took the microphone. His hand was shaking. He looked past the cameras, past the audience, as if he was speaking to someone in a room miles away. "This money," he started, his voice cracking. "This money isn't for a vacation or a new car." He took a shaky breath, and the whole world seemed to hold its own. "My youngest daughter, Lily, she's sick, very sick." A collective, sympathetic awe rippled through the audience. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I knew where this was going. We were going to get her the best doctors, fly to any specialist in the world. This money was for hope. This was for her fight. But then Dad's next words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs and silencing the celebration in my head. "The doctors, they've done all they can," he said, tears now streaming freely down his face. The camera zoomed in, capturing every drop for the nation to see. "This prize, it means we can give her the best. It means we'll be able to pay for her funeral." Silence. A thick, suffocating silence fell over the studio, broken only by the hum of the lights and the sound of my father's ragged sobs. The roaring beast of the audience had been slain by a single terrible sentence. The confetti, once a symbol of our victory, now looked like celebratory ash drifting down onto a gravesite. My sister Sarah let out a choked gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. Mike, still beaming just seconds before, looked from Dad to me, his smile collapsing in utter confusion. He didn't understand. He was only 13. How could he? The host, Chip, was a deer in the headlights for a full 3 seconds before his media training kicked in. He placed a gentle, patronizing hand on my father's shoulder. "John," he said, his voice dripping with a sincerity so fake it was almost physically painful to hear. "John, that is the bravest thing I have ever heard on this stage. To fight so hard, not for yourselves, but to honor your daughter. America, let's hear it for the strength of this incredible family." It was like a switch was flipped. The stunned silence was replaced by a wave of hesitant, then overwhelming applause. But it was a different kind of applause now. It wasn't the roar of victory. It was the soft, respectful clap of pity. They were applauding our tragedy. They were applauding my father's surrender. And in that moment, the $1 million prize felt like 30 pieces of silver. Every cell in my body screamed. Lily, my little sister. She was only 8. She was at home with my aunt right now, probably watching us on TV. Too weak to come to the studio, but still our biggest cheerleader. She was fighting. She had good days and bad days, but she was fighting. She drew pictures, She told terrible jokes. She made us promise to bring her back a giant foam finger. She wasn't a memory to be honored. She was a living, breathing little girl who was counting on us. And my father had just eulogized her on national television. I looked at him, his face buried in his hands, his shoulders shaking with what the world saw as grief, but what I saw as a disgusting performance. He'd done it. He'd weaponized our family's deepest pain to create a moment for the cameras. He'd sold our hope for a round of applause. The heat from the lights was gone, replaced by an icy fury that started in my gut and spread through my veins. "No," I whispered, the word barely a breath. Dad didn't hear me. Chip didn't hear me. But Sarah did. She looked at me, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. Chip leaned in, putting the microphone in front of me now. "Steve, your father is an inspiration. What does this moment mean to you?" I stared at the microphone as if it were a venomous snake. Then I looked past it, at Chip's perfectly capped teeth, at the tear he was trying to manufacture in the corner of his eye. I saw the producer just off stage, giving a thumbs up. They loved this. This was ratings gold. I took a step back, away from the microphone, away from Chip's comforting arm. I looked directly at my father. "How could you?" I said, my voice low and shaking with rage. "She's at home watching this. How could you?" Dad looked up, his face streaked with tears. His eyes pleaded with me. "Don't do this, son. Not here." But it was too late. He had already done it. He had drawn the line, and I knew which side I was on. I reached up and unclipped the microphone pack from my waistband. The sound of it clattering onto the stage floor was like a gunshot in the suddenly quiet studio. I tore the team jersey, number 12, over my head, the cheap polyester scratching at my skin, and threw it down. It landed in a heap next to the mic. "Steve? What are you doing?" Sarah cried, reaching for my arm. I ignored her. I ignored Mike calling my name. I ignored Chip's sputtering, "Folks, we seem to be having a very emotional moment here." I turned my back on all of it. On the cameras, on the audience, on the fake sympathy and the confetti-covered stage. I walked. I walked right past the giant novelty check they were wheeling out, past the stunned production assistants, and pushed through the heavy door that led backstage. The roar of the confused audience was cut off, leaving me in the sudden sterile silence of a concrete hallway. I didn't stop. I just kept walking, my footsteps echoing, each one a hammer blow against my father's betrayal. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't be there. I couldn't be a part of his lie. I found an empty dressing room and collapsed onto a sofa, my head in my hands. The adrenaline drained away, leaving only a hollow, sickening ache. A few minutes later, the door creaked open. It was Sarah and Mike, their faces pale. "Steve, what was that?" Sarah demanded, her voice trembling. "You humiliated Dad." "You humiliated all of us." "He's the one who humiliated us," I shot back, jumping to my feet. "He gave up on Lily. In front of millions of people, he just gave up." "He's just realistic," she sobbed. "You know what the doctors said." "The doctors said it was a long shot. They didn't say it was impossible." The door opened again. This time, it was Dad. He looked 10 years older than he had an hour ago. He closed the door quietly behind him. "Steve," he said, his voice flat, devoid of the emotion he'd shown on stage. "You can't do that. You can't walk away from this." "I can, and I did," I spat. "I'm not going back out there." I'm not going to smile and hold that check and pretend I'm okay with you using Lily's funeral to win a game show. It wasn't a game, he roared, his voice suddenly powerful, shaking the small room. You think this was a game for me? You think I wanted to say that? I had no choice. There's always a choice, Dad. And you chose to quit on her. His face crumpled, the anger vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. He looked utterly broken. The money isn't just for the funeral, Steve. He sank into a chair, his gaze fixed on the floor. The treatments, the experimental drugs the insurance wouldn't cover. I took out loans. I borrowed money from people you don't borrow from. A cold dread trickled down my spine. What are you talking about? He looked up at me, and for the first time I saw genuine fear in my father's eyes, a fear that had nothing to do with losing his daughter. They gave me a deadline, son. They knew we were on the show. They told me if we didn't win, the debt would be due, all of it, immediately. He let out a dry, rattling laugh that had no humor in it. The $1 million doesn't pay for a miracle cure, Steve. It pays for the one I already tried to buy. The sterile air in the dressing room suddenly felt thin, hard to breathe. The words hung between us, heavy and ugly. Loan sharks, that's what he meant. The kind of people you only see in movies, the kind of trouble that happens to other families. Not ours. We were the Millers. We had potlucks and movie nights. We didn't have debts with men who set deadlines. Mike, who had been silent this whole time, finally spoke. "What people, Dad?" he asked, his voice small, childish. "Who did you borrow from?" Dad just shook his head, refusing to meet my eyes. He looked like a cornered animal. "It doesn't matter who. What matters is the money. We have it now. It's over." "Over?" I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that shocked even me. "It's not over! You just went on national television and told the world your daughter is dying. You cashed in on everyone's pity. You think that's over?" "I did what I had to do to protect this family," he yelled, surging to his feet. His face was inches from mine, his eyes blazing with a desperate, frantic energy. "You think you're so noble, Steve? So righteous? What would you have done? Let them come to our house? Let them threaten your mother? Your sisters? You weren't there when they came to the garage, when they showed me pictures of all of you. You have no idea what I've been living with. Pictures." The word landed like a punch to the gut. These men, these shadows Dad had brought into our lives, they knew our faces. They knew where we lived. The foundation of my world, the simple, solid belief in the safety of my own home, cracked right down the middle. My anger, so pure and white-hot moments before, was now tainted with a sickening dose of fear. Sarah started to cry, a low, terrified whimper. "Dad, is that true? Were we in danger?" He turned to her, his face softening with guilt. "I handled it, sweetie. It's handled now." He looked back at me, his gaze hardening again. "That performance you're so disgusted by? That bought your safety. It bought us a way out. All you have to do is go back out there, smile for the cameras, and hold the damn check." I felt trapped. He had built a cage around me, not with bars, but with my love for my family. He was telling me that my integrity, my outrage on Lily's behalf, was a luxury we couldn't afford. That fighting for her hope was less important than paying off a debt to monsters. Every instinct I had screamed that this was wrong, that there had to be another way. But looking at the genuine terror on Sarah's face and the dawning horror in Mike's eyes, I felt my resolve beginning to crumble. There was a sharp knock on the door. A frantic-looking production assistant with a headset poked her head in. "Mr. Miller? Chip is wrapping up. They need you on stage for the final shot with the check in 3 minutes. The press is waiting." She gave us a tight, anxious smile and disappeared. 3 minutes. I had 3 minutes to decide whether to swallow my father's poison or risk whatever hell he had unleashed upon us. Dad put his hands on my shoulders. His grip was surprisingly strong. "Son, please, don't throw this away. Don't do it for me. Do it for Lily. Do it for your mother. We walk out there together, as a family. We hold the check, we smile, we thank America, and we go home. And this is all behind us. Behind us. The lie would live on forever." Every time someone recognized us in the grocery store and offered their condolences, every sympathetic look, every whispered, "I'm so sorry for your loss," before the loss had even happened, it would be a fresh twist of the knife. We wouldn't be the family that won $1 million. We'd be the tragic family that won $1 million to pay for their little girl's funeral. That would be our story, the one my father wrote for us. "And what about Lily?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "What do we tell her when she sees this? When she asks why Daddy told everyone she was going to die?" A shadow of deep, profound pain crossed my father's face. It was the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him all night that wasn't tainted by fear or desperation. "I'll handle that," he said quietly. "I'll make her understand." But I knew he couldn't. How do you make an 8-year-old girl understand that her own father has given up on her? How do you explain that her life was less valuable than a debt? "No," I said, shrugging his hands off my shoulders. I saw the flash of panic in his eyes. "No, I'm not going back out there with you. But this isn't over." I turned to Sarah and Mike. "Go. Go out there with him. Smile, hold the check. Do what you have to do. I'll meet you guys at the car." "Steve, no!" Sarah pleaded. "Just go," I said, my voice firm. "Trust me." Dad stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. He knew he'd lost. Forcing me wouldn't work. He gave a sharp, defeated nod, grabbed Sarah and Mike by their arms, and steered them out of the room. The moment the door clicked shut, I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type my passcode. I found the number I was looking for and hit dial. I had one shot at this, one chance to undo what he'd done, to take back our story. I had to blow up the lie before it had a chance to set. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Hello?" "Aunt Carol," I said, my voice tight and urgent. "It's Steve. Put Lily on the phone. Right now." There was a pause on the other end. "Steve? Honey, is everything okay? We just saw on the TV. Your father said—" "I know what he said," I snapped, pacing the tiny room like a caged tiger. "That's why I'm calling." "Is she in the room? Did she hear it?" She was, but I sent her to her bedroom to get her pajamas on just before." "Steve, what is going on?" Relief washed over me, so intense it made me dizzy. Lily hadn't heard it. Not yet. "Aunt Carol, listen to me very carefully. Do not let her see the TV. Do not tell her what Dad said. I'm going to fix this. Just put her on the phone, please." I heard my aunt's muffled voice calling for Lily. A few seconds later, a small, weak voice came through the speaker. "Stevie?" Did you win? Did you get me the foam finger? Tears pricked my eyes. Her voice, so full of hope. We won, Lily Pad. We won big. I took a deep, shuddering breath. And now I need you to be brave for me. Can you do that? I'm always brave, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. I know you are. I walked over to the dressing room door, my hand on the knob. I could hear the swelling music and the roar of the audience from the stage. They were presenting the check. I need you to stay on the phone with me, okay? And I'm going to put you on speakerphone so a lot of people can hear you. You're going to talk to everyone. I pushed the door open and stepped back into the hallway, the sound of the show suddenly much louder. I started walking, my strides long and purposeful, back towards the stage, back towards the lights, back towards my father's lie. What am I going to say, Stevie? Lily asked, her voice a tiny beacon in the chaos. You're just going to say hello? I said, my phone held tight in my hand like a weapon. You're going to let them hear you. You're going to let them know you're still fighting. I reached the edge of the stage entrance, hidden in the wings. I could see them all, my family, a broken mess of smiles and tears, holding a giant cardboard check while a nation pitied them. I was about to walk into the fire, and I was taking my whole family with me. I stood in the wings, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. On stage, under the glare of 1,000 lights, my family was a portrait of manufactured grief. Dad had his arm around Sarah, who was doing a poor job of hiding her terrified sobs behind a watery smile. Mike stood rigidly, his eyes wide and vacant, clutching a corner of the giant check as if it were a life raft. Chip Smiley was milking the moment for all it was worth, his voice a low, somber murmur. An incredible emotional victory for the Miller family, he was saying to the camera. A victory born from strength, from love, and from the courage to face the unthinkable. He was painting my father as a hero, a stoic, grieving father fighting for his daughter's dignity and death. And the crowd was eating it up. I could see people in the front row dabbing at their eyes. My father had sold them a tragedy, and they had bought it completely. Stevie? Are you there? Lily's small voice crackled through the phone. It was the only real thing in this whole stadium of lies. I'm here, Lily Pad, I whispered back, pressing the speakerphone button. It's showtime. I took a breath and stepped out from the wings. I didn't run, I didn't shout. I just walked, calm and deliberate, straight towards the center of the stage. The first person to see me was a cameraman who swiveled his heavy equipment towards me, his eyes wide with surprise. Then the audience started to murmur, a ripple of confusion spreading through the seats. Chip Smiley stopped mid-sentence. His professional smile faltered. Steve? Young man, I thought you'd... Dad saw me then. The color drained from his face. He looked from me to the phone in my hand, and a raw, primal fear entered his eyes. He knew exactly what I was about to do. He started to move towards me, to intercept me, but it was too late. I was already at the center of the stage, standing right next to Chip. Chip, I said, my voice steady, amplified by the host's own microphone still pinned to his lapel. I think there's someone everyone here should meet. I held up my phone. The entire studio, the millions watching at home, went dead silent. And into that silence, I spoke clearly. Lily, can you say hi to everyone? A tiny, innocent voice, amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system, filled the vast studio. Hi, everyone. It was an electric shock. The audience gasped as one. Chip Smiley looked like he'd swallowed his own tongue. On the giant screen behind the stage, the director had cut to a close-up of my phone, as if to prove the voice was real. "My name is Lily Miller," her voice continued, a little stronger now. "And I have cancer, but I'm not dying, I'm fighting. And my big brother Stevie and my family just won all this money so the doctors can get me the best medicine to help me win." Every word was a hammer blow, shattering the false narrative my father had created. I watched his face. The fear was gone, replaced by a look of utter devastation. He wasn't just watching his lie unravel, he was hearing his daughter's unbreakable spirit, a spirit he had tried to bury on national television. Sarah was openly sobbing now, but these were tears of relief. Mike was staring at the phone, a look of pure awe on his face. I took the phone back. "My father is a good man," I said, my voice ringing with a conviction I didn't know I had. "He's a desperate man who loves his family so much he was willing to do a terrible thing to protect us from a threat we shouldn't have been facing. He made a deal with the devil to pay for my sister's medical bills, and tonight he thought he had to sell a tragedy to pay that debt. But he was wrong." I looked directly into the main camera, speaking not just to the audience, but to the shadows my father feared. "We won this money. All of it. And not 1 cent is going to a funeral. It's going to my sister's treatment. It's going into a foundation for other families who can't afford experimental cures. And if anyone," I let the word hang in the air, "has a problem with that, they can come and talk to me. Because we are not the tragic Miller family. We are the fighting Miller family. And we are just getting started." Then I did something I hadn't planned. I walked over to the giant novelty check. I ripped it right down the middle, the sound of tearing cardboard echoing through the silent studio. I threw the two halves to the floor. "We don't want your pity," I said. "We just want a fighting chance." For a moment, nothing happened. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy. Then a single person in the back of the audience began to clap, then another and another. Within seconds, the entire studio was on its feet, but the applause was different this time. It wasn't pity. It wasn't for a victory in a game. It was a roar of respect, of support, of defiance. It was a roar for Lily. In the chaos that followed, studio executives and security guards flooded the stage. But it didn't matter. The story was out. The real one. The next few weeks were a blur of news interviews, talk shows, and lawyers. The game show, caught in a PR nightmare, not only gave us the $1 million with no strings attached, but also publicly connected us with a top-tier legal firm, pro bono. The story of Dad's debt came out, and the public and legal pressure on the loan sharks was so immense they simply vanished. The threat evaporated under the bright, unforgiving light of public scrutiny. We never became the family defined by a funeral. We became the family that fought back. The foundation I'd blurted out on stage became a reality, funded by our winnings and an outpouring of donations from strangers who had been moved by Lily's voice. The hardest part was going home and facing Dad. There was no shouting this time. Just a long, quiet conversation in the dead of night at our kitchen table. He told me everything, the shame and fear he'd carried alone for months. I told him he had broken my trust, but that I understood the place it had come from. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. The first step on a long road back to being a family. Tonight, 6 months later, I'm sitting in a hospital waiting room. But it's different. There's no dread, no fear. The new treatment, the one we could finally afford, is working. The doctors are using words like remission and miracle. Through the window in the door, I can see Lily sitting up in her bed, drawing in a notebook. She's lost her hair, but not her spirit. Dad is sitting next to her, reading a story aloud. He catches my eye and gives me a small, grateful nod. It's a look that says more than words ever could. We won the $1 million, but that's not the prize that mattered. The real prize was the truth. It was ugly and painful, and it almost tore us apart. But it also set us free. It gave us our story back, and it gave Lily what she'd asked for all along. Not a foam finger, not a fortune, but a fighting chance. And for the first time in a very long time, it feels like we're winning.